Welcome to Turning the Page, a Lexington Public Library podcast. I'm Mariam.
And I'm Erin West. If you love the library because of books, the programs, and the people behind both, then this is the podcast for you.
And even if you don't, there's still fun to be had. We will bring you the latest book releases that are worth checking out, figuratively and literally.
And we will discuss all of the happenings at the library to look out for.
And of course, what would a library podcast be without a special guest? We will get to know some special authors that are making an impact on our local literary scene.
Whether you're listening to us in your car while washing dishes or snuggled up with a warm drink, we are grateful for your time and hope you enjoy.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Lexington Public Library, Marksbury branch. We're so glad that you're here, and I hope that this evening is inspiring and memorable for you. My name is Mariam. I'm the Collection Services Manager at the Lexington Public Library. I'm also the host of Turning the Page podcast, and this event will be recorded for later release, so be sure to download wherever you get your podcast. So tonight, we have the honor of welcoming Frank X. Walker. He's a poet, educator, visual artist, Kentucky native, and one of the most influential literary voices of our time. Frank X. Walker is the former Kentucky Poet Laureate and the founder of the Affrilachian Poets, a groundbreaking collective that redefined what it means to claim and celebrate Appalachian identity. Through acclaimed collections such as Buffalo Dance, Turn Me Loose, I Dedicate This Ride, and About Flight, Walker's work blends history, social justice, personal narrative, and lyrical brilliance. His poetry invites us to wrestle with the past, see our present with clarity, and imagine a more compassionate and equitable future. Beyond the page, his dedication to teaching, community building, and amplifying underrepresented voices has shaped generations of writers and thinkers here in Kentucky and far beyond. We're so grateful to have him with us this evening to share his words and insights and his creative spirit. Please join me in giving a warm Lexington welcome to Frank X. Walker. Hi, Professor Walker.
Hello, do I need to take this thing down, or can you guys hear?
It's up to you, whatever.
All right, let me just move it around to here.
All right. As long as Erin can hear us. Good.
Am I good sound-wise?
All right.
Hey, Lexington.
So, let's start at the very beginning.
Oh, that's a long way back.
So, your journey started in Danville. Can you tell us a little bit about your early journey with writing? What pushed you and what inspired you to poetry?
Wow.
Or who?
I think the what is probably more accurate, but it's a number of things. It's a kind of collision of forces that include a love of books that was born out of kind of a situation that happened because I had 7 sisters who didn't like me very much. And we did not have a television. So my choices were to be tortured on a regular basis or hide from them under the bed or in a closet with a book. I chose the books.
Smart.
And very early on, I grew up in the housing projects in Danville, Kentucky. And every Saturday, the bookmobile would roll into McIntyre Homes. First kid in line every Saturday. Last kid off the bus every Saturday. I would read as many books as I could for free, as long as they were parked there, and then leave it whatever the limit was, with a stack of books. Let's blame that on Steve from Camp Nelson. Make sure you see him before you leave.
Shout out Camp Nelson.
Shout out to Camp Nelson. Anything for a free commercial. But yeah, so I think that collision of forces made me a reader and a lover of books very early, like most future writers. So I fell in love with stories, and I fell in love with the power of books, and I learned how books had the power of kind of erasing the things that we didn't know needed filling in our lives. You know, we didn't know we were poor. You know, we were not the family that every spring break hopped into a car and drove to, you know, to the beach. That never happened. We didn't have a car. But thanks to books, I could go to outer space. I could go to the bottom of the ocean with Jacques Cousteau. I could travel to any continent and see any animal, and see any famous person ever who had a book connected to their experience. And it filled in so many gaps. My head was almost exploding, you know. And I think there was a point in our development where my mother purchased a set of childcraft encyclopedias. And remember books, remember a whole encyclopedia before you could get all the information on your watch. We had the whole set, and I'd like to think I touched every single page in that set, you know, in the absence of a television, hiding from sisters. So I think that is the beginning, you know, that love of stories, that love of books, and the writing came after that. You know, I remember asking a librarian, I think this particular librarian shall remain unnamed because
oh no.
I asked a librarian after I had, you know, kind of powered through the African American section, which was 2 shelves on the bottom in the side room next to periodicals. And I said, why aren't there more books, you know, about people who look like me? And she said, why don't you write one? But I was 10 years old, and it hurt. And I think she was not trying to make a writer, you know. I think she really was being mean-spirited.
Yeah. She didn't validate your concern.
Yeah. But it stuck. And I still carry that, and it still stings a little bit. But it was a real question. You know, I think that, you know, walking around this library today and looking at the books just on display, not even on the shelves, but on display. That never happened for me when I was a kid. And so I was hungry for stories about people who look like me and my own experience and something very familiar. And it was comic books that first told me I existed, you know, seeing my face on the cover or a face like mine, you know, with the Black Panther or Luke Cage, the Falcon, you know, I was like, wow, this could happen. This could happen. And I didn't know any people of color who were also writers. And that wasn't a real thing either. So this happened very slowly. By the time I got to high school, you know, very in love with books and stories, my English teachers took a great interest in me and my kind of hunger for books. And I remember taking my first creative writing class, and I still have the journal. This was 1976. This journal from that class. At the end of the first 9 weeks, I mean, I remember she had written in it, you know, you have a gift for words. You know, you could be a writer. And I think that kind of planted a seed, you know. Yeah. I never imagined. I thought I was going to be an astronaut.
There's still time to be that.
There's still time.
Well, as this librarian, my first interaction with your books was the book, your work, Affrilachian. So when I read that book, I made a connection. My father introduced me to Middle Eastern poets. His favorite was Mahmoud Darwish. And when I read that, your book, Affrilachian, I believe it was my freshman year of college, I made a connection between your work and Mahmoud Darwish in the way that you represent the unrepresented voices. When you coined that phrase, Affrilachian, the word Affrilachian, how did your understanding of your work change? And how did other people's perception of your work change?
I don't think those two things were happening at the same time. You know, I think they even thought about how other people were accepting or rejecting my words was something that happened later. But in the beginning, I was still trying to find a place, not just for me, but I was part of a group of writers who didn't have a name initially. We were meeting just because we had a common love for words. And we were meeting in the back room of the Martin Luther King Cultural Center and the old UK Student Center. This was started in the late 80s, off and on, and then became a regular thing by 91. And so we were meeting every Monday night for 2 hours. And we would come in and say, I wrote this new thing. Do you mind if I share it? And people, yes, please. And then that grew to, how could it be better? And then you should read this out loud in public at a cafe. And it just kept growing and growing and growing. And I remember when I took in the poem that used the word Affrilachian for the first time, it had come out of a response to going to a reading that initially had been advertised as the best writers from Appalachia. And then they added Nikki Finney. And they changed the marketing of the book, and they took out Appalachia from the title and the marketing. And I remember thinking, why did they have to change the title? Because they added a Black writer. I mean, what was going on? So I went to my dictionary that evening, and I looked up the definition in 1991 of Appalachian, and it said, white residents of the mountainous regions of Appalachia. And I was stunned. I immediately felt the kind of, othering that happened by being rendered invisible in that one definition. And so, as I like to say, because I couldn't afford a therapist, I took out my pen and paper and I started trying to figure out on the page how I should feel, or just write towards an answer, not try to answer it. But at the very end of that poem, it closes, if you think making shine from corn is hard as Kentucky coal, imagine being an Affrilachian poet. And so I take that to the writing group, and they were immediately interested in the word and said, wait a minute, I've never heard that word, but I know that word. And we talked about it and we're excited about it. By the time we closed that evening, we decided to name ourselves the Affrilachian Poets. So that was the birth of this. Well, we were already born, but that was the late naming and claiming, because we understood immediately the power of that word, that it gave us room to be included in something. And it was easy to, we chose our motto that same week, giving voice to the voiceless, rendering visible the invisible. We wanted to create a space for everybody who was not included in that definition, who also claimed that space. And it was exhilarating. And most people don't know that this is the 35th anniversary this year. Incredible. And we're, I would say this event officially kicks off a year-long celebration, So, and I know many of you are Nikki Finney fans. She'll be at Transy next Thursday, giving a lecture about poetry. And then the very next night at Transy, 17 Affrilachian poets are coming back to town to read. So, see you there.
So it's a movement. It's a movement. How do you see the definition of Appalachian identity evolving today, especially for young writers? I mean, you've taken a lot of young writers under your wing and included them into this movement. How do you see them kind of embracing that identity?
It didn't take very long for it to. I think the word outgrew us even, because there are visual artists and photographers and musicians who describe themselves as Affrilachian. Yeah. There was I got a wonderful letter written longhand from a woman in Phoenix, Arizona, who was born in Appalachia, Virginia, who wrote me this longhand letter. She was a Berea alumni. But in her letter, she talked about never feeling like she belonged where she was from until she saw the word Affrilachian. Growing up as a Black woman in those mountains, but growing up with jazz and of, listening to the Grand Ole Opry, but not feeling a part of it, not seeing herself in those conversations. And it was rewarding, but more than that. I mean, to know that other people were claiming the word. And it's in that same space that people were saying, you should trademark this word. You need to. And I knew immediately this, it wasn't something that I needed to own.
Yeah.
And not owning it left room for other people to step into it.
Sort of counterproductive to what the word actually means, isn't it?
I think so. I think it allows people to. I mean, I think everybody has a right to claim the space they were born in. Yeah. But if the space has already been predefined and it excludes you, what else can you do? I mean, you have to revolt. You have to. I don't think we were trying to cause a revolution. We weren't trying to create a movement. We were just trying to belong together and to feel comfortable in a space that was not very friendly to us. I came to UK in 1979 as a freshman, and in the space of one semester, I heard the N-word more times in those 4 or 5 months than I had heard my entire life. Yeah. And it was a very unwelcoming space. But what that did is that it forced or encouraged people of color to be closer together, to hold each other up. So out of that cultural center space, we formed a writing group, we formed basketball and football intramural teams. We had a theater group, a dance group, a singing group, all things that felt like family. There were individuals who would come to the King Center on the way to class and drop off their children. Wow. Knowing that it was such a safe space that they all they had to say was, like, Frank, my daughter's over here, here's her lunch, I gotta go to class. And it wasn't a question or a debate. It was kind of understood that this was a familial space. This was home, away from home. And I think that original cultural center was something that was such a real thing. At every UK reunion that I make it back to, I see those individuals and they say, "Remember me?" And I think, okay, 10 years at the center, what year? I need you to narrow it down, and it takes about, 2 questions or 10 seconds
to trigger the memory.
To trigger something that gets me back to their year and their class. But I was there a long time, and it was, I don't know that it was life-changing for everybody who passed through, but it registered in such a way that it became part of their education and their experience. And people say very comfortably that, they wouldn't have made it through UK if it had not been for the cultural center, or their cultural experience was richer because of opportunities like the Affrilachian poets provided, the musicians provided, the family atmosphere provided. And I think that's also part of why, most of the original core members not only are still in touch with each other, but we kind of grew up together. We were in each other's weddings. We went to each other's funerals. All of my children think all of their aunts and uncles are artists and writers. Yeah. Because everybody who came through our house, was in town for a presentation or on the way to a performance, or that's what they grew up with. It was, kind of secondhand. Like when they met adults who knew their father who didn't write or didn't make art, they were like, "Wait, what's wrong with you? What happened?"
So take us through your writing process. What kind of sparks a poem for you?
Oh, wow. It depends what kind of thing I'm working on. I think the thing about, my wife will tease me for this because she knows I like to say that I'm not really a poet. Most people know me as a poet because 13, 15 books, who's counting? But I'm trained as a fiction writer. I'm just really slow. And I write plays, I write nonfiction, fiction, but poetry is easier because I don't have to stop my life or check out of the world to write a poem. I could be driving from Louisville to Lexington and trying to process something that I experienced emotionally and trying to put it into words and find something that helps me articulate that experience. And that may end up as a poem. When I'm trying to write fiction, I need to get away. I need a huge block of time. I need at least 4 hours uninterrupted to read the thing I'd worked on before, to catch up, to reintroduce myself to those characters, to try to find the pace of it. And it just takes so much longer. Very different from writing poetry. Yeah. So my process, if I'm trying to write a poem, really depends on, one, if I'm awake enough. Like I'm a morning person. So my brain cuts on about 4:30 every morning.
Wow.
Whether I'm under the cover or not. And if I've had enough rest, or if I've tricked myself into thinking about something all night long in my subconscious, I can go straight to work. But I do most of my creative work between 4:30 and 6:30 or 7:30 if it's the weekend, and I don't have to, help get somebody ready for school. And it's worked for me. I mean, it's if you can do that consistently enough, I've been accused of being prolific, but it has as much to do with insomnia or, just being awake and undisturbed, for those 2 hours. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I could keep at that same pace if I had 6 hours to write, So I know I have 2 solid hours and it's mine. And there's no kid asking for a waffle, there's no, spouse asking me to turn the light back off or reminding me of what I would have forgotten if I didn't get the reminder. It's just me and the page. And that thing that I've been carrying around, trying to chase and get down, and everything is in bounds. I think that. But I'm also writing and working on multiple projects at the same time.
Wow, okay.
Always, like right now, I'm going to read a few poems tonight that aren't part of a book yet, but they are some of the most recent things I've written.
Okay,
and
nice treat.
And it's, they've never had an audience, so they're raw. But it's a reflection of what's happening in my world right now. Yeah. It has to do with, our 7-year-old and his inability to sleep through the night and where he ends up. So it may sound familiar to parents out there. So I've been writing about that because it happens so often. But at the same time, I just signed I was offered a 2-book contract with Norton Liveright for a 3rd volume of York poems and a collection of poems that I already finished that are about the intersection of race and leisure and politics that are primarily poems about golf. The 100 years before Tiger Woods turned pro. People think about Tiger Woods as the introduction of Black golfers, but you can go back to 1896, and that's where it really begins, and then march forward. And there's a whole history there that most people don't know about that I found fascinating. And a collection of short stories that I started last year.
Oh, wow.
And an unfinished novel that I've rewritten 10 times. And these new poems, about family. So
incredible. So a lot of your poem does take on, historical personas. How do you take on your research for each individual person that you want to write about?
Yeah, my goal is to erase as much ignorance as I have, as I can recognize. When I began to research for the Lewis and Clark books that feature York primarily.
Buffalo Dance.
Yeah, Buffalo Dance was the first one. Then I think for me, I didn't know what I didn't know because it was my first time trying to write about history. But I knew I needed York to tell his own story.
Yeah.
And so I ended up starting with one single book. I devoured that book, and it produced maybe 2 poems. Then I heard about St. Louis, and I'd been through St. Louis. I knew that there was an arch downtown, but I didn't know that beneath the arch in St. Louis, under the ground, that there was a football-length museum that was called the Westward Expansion Museum that held the largest collection of Lewis and Clark paraphernalia in the world. So I went every weekend for 5 weeks in a row, and I would get a nearby hotel, walk over, and I would watch the IMAX film they had like over and over again, and I would end up back at home with a couple of new books, each of which produced a couple of new poems, maybe. After about the 4th weekend, they mentioned that we sell this film. You could you could just buy it and take it with you.
You didn't have to come all the way.
I didn't have to come all the way for the film. I didn't know that at the time. So I not only did I buy it and take it home, I would watch it every night before I went to sleep because I wanted to dream about it. I was so immersed in everything Lewis and Clark and York that I needed to be in that world. And even a year later, when I thought I was finished with a book, I realized it just felt incomplete. And I made my first trip out west. I made it all the way to the Nez Perce Reservation. And the travel there and back and the time spent there made me realize really quickly that I'd left out a main character, and that was a landscape. And I had to go back and look at every one of those poems and then ask the question, where does the landscape show up? And I had to rewrite an entire book because I didn't know I had left out these characters until I was face to face with the same things that I imagined York had seen.
Well, that was my next question is, when you first started writing Buffalo Dance, did you know that York's story would continue?
I did not. In fact, I'm easily moved by embarrassment. When I finished the first book, I remember, I think I was in Great Falls, Montana, and a woman in the audience said, we appreciate York's voice, but what about the women? What about his wife? What about his mother? I didn't have an answer. And I'm thinking, I've done a good thing. York had been left out. Now he's in here. And she was unacceptable. And that was the kind of primary impetus to write a second book. And in the second book, When Winter Come, there are at least 12 different voices, and most of those voices are the voices of women. Even the voice of the river is the voice of a woman. And that happened primarily because I was embarrassed that I didn't have a better answer when I was asked that question, what about his wife? What about his mother? And then I thought I was done. And I remember getting a phone call on the way back I was driving from Washington, D.C. to Lexington, and I got a phone call from a filmmaker in California, Khalil Joseph. And Khalil, very chatty at the moment, and he's asking me about the third book. And I said, what third book? He said, when are you gonna finish it? I was like, there's no third book. What are you talking about? And so he said, well, are you sure? I was like, I'm pretty sure I would know about it. I wrote the first 2. There's not a third book. And so we stayed in touch. He sent me some of his work. He called me again one day. I was driving, same trip. I'm in the mountains. And he said, you been thinking about that book? I was like, no, Khalil, there's not a third book. He said, but if there were, when do you think it would happen? What do you imagine? And so we were talking about the fact that we both agreed that there's no way the published account of what happened at the end of York's life, that he didn't like being a free man, that he was on the way back to William Clark to be a slave again, but he died in the mountains of Tennessee of the cholera. That's the official story. We both agreed that we didn't believe that, not even a little bit. And there were all these rumors that he returned out west, that he lived among the natives, peoples. And, then when I found out from the Nez Perce that York had married a daughter of the chief when he spent the winter with the Nez Perce tribe, and they produced a son who was named York. And that in their transcribed oral histories, there are stories about York and their courtship on the Clearwater River. And I'm thinking, this is not in any history book. No. And they gave me a copy of the transcribed oral histories, and they said, do something with this, you know. So I have all this extra pressure. And I remember on one of those drives, Khalil called. I insisted there was no third book. I get home and I go to the studio, and there's this poem just kind of gnawing around in my head, and becomes the first poem in the third book. You know, so there is a third York book. It's finished. Next year, Live Right Norton has acquired the rights to the first two books, and they're going to publish all three books together as a volume, as a trilogy of poetry, which just seems odd. I don't know that poetry comes in trilogies, but this one does. So that comes out next year. In fact, a year from now. So
exciting stuff. What advice would you give young writers, or writers that aren't so young, that don't feel like their stories kind of fit into the mold of traditional ideas of what literature is?
Wow, that's a good one. Thank you for that. Well, my easy button answer is always to read. You know, I think that we don't know what we don't know. Yeah. And the thing for writers, the hardest thing for a writer to know, in my opinion, is to know what their own voice sounds like, to know what their own story is. And part of that is a listening exercise. You know, I think that every young person should be in conversation with the oldest person in their family. You know, they should be asking about the people that they never met and the family's personal history, because somebody has to keep that story alive. Somebody has to carry that knowledge with them, you know, in their body, you know, and understand how important it is and what happens if it's lost, if nobody tells that story. That, you know, I think there's an African axiom that says that a person or people are not dead until people no longer speak their names. You know, so you could keep, you know, your relatives alive just by telling the story. So that's a listening exercise. The other part of listening is really reading. That I think if you read so much that when you hear a poem, that you know that, wait a minute, that sounds like a Nikki Finney poem. Yeah. You know, that's Nikki Giovanni. That's Yusef Komunyakaa. That's Lucille Clifton. That's Shauna Morgan. You know, I mean, if you have read enough of their work, your ear becomes fine-tuned. And I think only then can you hear your own voice. Yeah. But I think both of those are listening exercises. And I think for a young writer, the most important one of those is to read, you know, before even writing, because reading will build your vocabulary, you know, will help you fall in love with stories. Even if you didn't like it. I asked my students, or when I was interviewing students who were trying to get into the Governor School for the Arts writing program, I might ask them, you know, what's the worst thing you ever read? And what was wrong with it? And they would be stumped initially because they're thinking that it was published, it had to be good. Yeah. But I'm given the permission to not have liked it. And what I'm listening for is something about the power of story and, you know, their understanding of it and how they're thinking about writing. Because I didn't want just a bunch of English students in the program. I wanted people who were serious about writing, who were so serious about writing that they think about it all the time, that they're trying to be analytical, trying to break down their words, they're trying to understand the story behind the story behind the story. Like that's how a writer moves in the world and I think behaves in the world, at least in my experience. And there, you know, as a segue from Governor School, one of the things that we did very well at Governor School is that we made a lot of great doctors and lawyers, right? Because, you know, our goal was to convince, at least when I was in charge, the goal was to convince young people that they needed and wanted to do this for the rest of their lives or never again. And Imagine, being the most talented person in your school and then come into an experience where everybody's more talented than you, or everybody's hungrier than you, or everybody's more disciplined than you, or more committed than you. And you realize that, you can write, but you don't love it.
Yeah.
Maybe you should just go practice law or be an engineer. And we made some parents happy because, they would tell them the same thing anyway. But then there are all those kids who you knew when you met them that, they were born to do this, that they had that fire. And I love that part about Governor School, is seeing how talented these young people were and how much of themselves was fully invested in this art form and this desire to express themselves via art. And it was just an amazing opportunity. I think, and people don't know that Kentucky is probably the most successful state in the country when it comes to the number of young people going through a program like Governor School for the Arts, and then what happens to them afterwards. Nobody is doing, the only people doing it better would be North Carolina, because they have a permanent campus for Governor School for the Arts. You can leave your high school as a 16-year-old and move to another city and be in GSA for 4 years for free.
Here in Kentucky, is it just a short program?
It's a 3-week,
like a 3-week summer program?
In the summer program, and I think that, one of us should win the lottery and make that happen for our young artists, okay?
Yeah. It's a great program for students. So how do you kind of stay grounded and feel inspired during like those writer block moments, that kind of creative difficulty? What do you do to kind of get yourself over that hurdle?
Well, this always makes a few people angry, but I don't believe in writer's block. My definition of writing is broader than fingers on keys and pencil on paper. I think the writing process starts way earlier than that. That when sometimes even when you're sleeping, because if you can dream a thing and then wake up and write about it, then the writing process began while you were sleeping. I think reading and editing is such an important part of writing, that when you're reading and editing, you're involved in the writing process. I think research is part of the writing process. So, you could be having a bad day, and for me, if you were really horrible to me, and I know it, it always makes me feel a little better by thinking, I'm gonna write about you one day. You're gonna be in my book. And there's something about that just feels like, I won that encounter, right? You will show up on my pages. So be careful how you treat writers,
Yes.
because, so, I think because of that, even when you're not putting pencil to page, you can be involved. I think just being alive, you're involved in the writing process.
Yeah.
Living. I think for young writers, another thing I tell them to do is go experience the world. Travel, learn another language, make mistakes and try to learn from them. All of that stuff is fuel. I'm teaching a class right now, and the focus is memory. And these are 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and but by our point of view, they don't know very much. They've only been alive 18, 19 years. But that's 19 years of memory that they own individually. Everything that happened every night, every memory, everything that happened in their childhood, be it traumatic or exhilarating, is potential for something that will connect to their adult selves. So we're trying to find ways to tap into those things and turn them into poems. But there's no writer's block. Don't believe that. Don't fall for it.
So you kind of answered this already, but what's next for you? Any upcoming projects?
So many. What's next? The thing I'm most excited about right now is that, this is February. I've had 3 short stories accepted for publication. Which is exciting to me because most people don't know that a year ago, as as part of a personal celebration of Gurney Norman. And the fact that I've been teaching his short story collection, Kinfolk, for almost 15 years in my classroom, I decided that I would try to write a collection of short stories inspired by his collection. And so I set out to write one a month, started in January of 2026. And I finished 10.
Incredible.
And, I've polished up 4 of them, and shared them with spaces, and 3 of them have already been accepted for publication somewhere. So I imagine that, when I get time to get back to that, that'll be a future book. But again, it's juggling these things. I'm also a visual artist, so I'm trying to squeeze in that happening. I'm working on what do they call them? Story trail book. The only accessible hiking trail in the Smoky Mountains, in the heart of Tennessee, between Knoxville and Gatlinburg. There's this beautiful trail that for the last 2 years I've visited in an effort to research in person and write a children's book that will appear as placards on this trail. And the speaker is a Luna moth. And so that'll be my second children's book effort, but on a hiking trail.
The first one being A is for Affrilachian.
A is for Affrilachian, yes. Thank you. And so I'm excited about that. I think I get to do some more research. Spring break, I'm going to the very first African-American country club in New Jersey, because it was one of the first group of African-American golfers. And so I want to know that story. I want to go to, I think it's in Southampton, but Shinnecock Reservation and Shinnecock Golf Course featured in 1896 the second U.S. Open of golf, starred an African-American and a Native American golfer, and the African-American got second place. And they were also caddies at the golf course. For me, that begins 100 years. Between that date and Tiger Woods turning pro is 100 years. And there are so many stories between those men and those 100 years. I'm trying to visit some of these places and find more poems. I have about 80 pages, but I'm hoping to get about 20 more. So I'll do some more research and try to finish that by the end of the year. And if I can finish all these projects, I'll pick up the novel again. A couple of people have seen it and read it, and one place wanted to publish it as is. My wife didn't think it was finished yet, so I can't let it go until she gives a green light. So,
is that all, Professor Walker? Come on, get a move on it.
I'm trying. I keep falling asleep for some reason.
Which writers and artists are you currently influencing you?
Wow.
That you're currently reading and finding joy?
I'm currently reading 4 different manuscripts for blurbs, but 3 thesis projects, because these 3 students in the MFA program graduate in the spring. So I don't get to do any pleasure reading, although their thesis projects give me pleasure. But I'm also reading it as a scholar and teacher and trying to help them get it right, because some of these things will turn into books, first books for them. It's work. It's not just pleasure. But altogether, it's a lot of reading. There's one collection I'm reading that gives me much pleasure. It's a collection of poems by Chris Rose, who lives out in Washington State. And we met in Kansas at a writers' conference many years ago. And And I think when I met him, he wasn't a poet. He just loved poetry. He was a teacher and educator. And since then, he started reading and eventually started telling his own story. He's a Filipino-American. He's interested in his family history. He's slowly losing family members, and it's becoming even more important to capture his story. But he has all these wonderful poems about growing up, feeling othered and ostracized in his community. And it's so music, fueled because he loved the music. He probably should have been a musician instead of a teacher. He could have done both. But the music shows up in such a large way that I'm reading and enjoying those poems just to write a blurb. But it's one of the things that I'm privileged to do. Although I wish I could have a light that said, that would come on when people send me an email and say, I met you last week, and I wonder if you read these 100 pages by tomorrow and tell me how good they are so I can put them on the back of my book. I'm exaggerating, but I usually can only accept blurbs like 6 months in advance because I've already said yes. And it's hard to say no because I have so many friends that, it's hard to say no to a friend, or colleague. But sometimes you have to. You can only read so much, if you want to sleep.
And be with your family.
And enjoy your family. And I love my family, and I want as much time as possible with them.
That's awesome. So we're going to have Professor Walker read a piece. But before that, I started doing a little thing on the podcast where I do like a rapid fire question.
Uh-oh.
So you ready?
No, but I'll try to respond anyway.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Okay. Writing early in the morning or late at night? You'd already said that. You already answered this.
Only early in the morning.
Only in the morning. Your favorite spot to write, whether in Lexington or Kentucky or anywhere else?
On a plane.
On an airplane. Interesting.
Because I'm terrified of flying. And it allows me to step away and write or read the entire time I'm in the air.
A book you wish you could read again for the first time?
Ooh, for the first time. Malcolm X by Alex Haley.
Mm-hmm. Good one. Pencil, pen, or keyboard?
Pencil.
Favorite snack while writing?
Twizzlers, strawberry.
A song that always boosts your creativity?
Wow, a song that boosts my creativity. I don't know that there's one. I don't need music to write. Usually, if I listen to music, I follow the words and they distract me.
Yeah.
So if I'm at least trying to set a mood, I need to be instrumental. So anything Miles Davis ever created would work, or Coltrane. If I'm really trying to go deep.
I don't know. Brian had Nina Simone on earlier for us. That's a good one too.
Yeah, Nina's. But again, when I hear Nina Simone, I think of four women. And I think of a writing exercise, and I think four different voices, and I forget what I was trying to write.
A historical figure you'd love to give a voice to next that you haven't written about yet?
Steve Biko.
Tell me more.
There's a whole history that seems even more relevant today that is about apartheid. A lot of people think it's over, it's history. Stephen Biko was a freedom fighter who died young in police custody. There have been a bunch of movies about him, but there's so much there still to the story that I think deserves a longer treatment. That I'm still interested in his story.
We look forward to it. If you weren't a poet, what job would you try? I know you're a teacher, but something else other than teacher.
Other than teacher? Visual artist. that count?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Definitely. What's the best compliment a reader could give you?
Oh, the best compliment I've ever gotten, a man asked me, he said, where did you find these things York wrote? I'm so confused because I thought he couldn't write. It's like, where did you get them? And I said, I wrote them. He said, no, I read them. That wasn't you. That was York. I was like, thank you, but I mean that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the best.
Yeah.
That was the best. And the time my mother was a Pentecostal minister for 22 years. And she would tell everybody she was raising me to be a minister. But she came to one of my first poetry readings. And at the end, she said, that'll do. So those two together, it's a tie.
Well, thank you so much for playing along. Could you go ahead and read a few pieces or a piece for us and give us a little treat?
Sure, a little treat. These are all short, so I'll read all three of them.
Please, yes.
And this is, I mentioned this earlier, so I don't need much more setting up. I don't know if he's in the space. He's somewhere in this building. If you see a 7-year-old with a big afro, is he outside the door? Okay. This is for him. Well, they all are, but this is called Quasar. He's a kind of a space nerd. It's Quasar. He's easy to find, even in the dimly lit, crowded bounce house. Not because he's the only chocolate delight among the swarm of unbaked pastries, but the immeasurable joy that powers his invisible rocket ship from launch pad to splashdown almost glows in the dark. That and the signature silhouette that separates him from the others, a generous starburst of hair that is as unique as sun-kissed skin in this sea of Kentucky blue and whites. All right. Stop. All right. Two more that are kind of the same theme for real. It's called Mother Hearing. She separates the soft thud of boy feet on the stairwell from the space between my hurried breaths. She can measure the glee in both our throats through 2 floors apart. A full second before the door swings open, I hear her hand and now tense thigh say, wait. Her smile greets his with matching innocence, while I search for mine beneath the blanket like the half-naked thief that I am. That's a love poem. That's for February, by the way. And one more for Kumasi. Pocket knife. Our boy burrows in his sleep, retracing his origins, reaching for warmth, seeking to snuggle, to re-womb. But I am the rock wall he must climb to get here. With sharp nails and elbows, the blade of his foot and heel, he whittles away at my resolve, punishing me for my proximity to her. A steady drop of water can wear a hole in a rock. A well-placed knee can too.
Thank you so much.
I hope you heard that, Kumasi.
Thank you so much for treating us to these poems that are unpublished. You hear it here, folks. So thank you so much, Professor Walker. I want to take this time to also thank Jamie West, manager of the Marksberry Family Branch, and the team here that helped set up the room, and Brian Clausing and Aaron West for setting up the tech. I do want to let you know that we do have another author coming on February 22nd at Beaumont, Up From Some Dirt, a.k.a. Ronald Davis. So he'll be at Beaumont at 2 o'clock on February 22nd, so you're welcome to join us then. And thank you guys for joining us for this evening. We love having these events for the community. We really want to enhance your experience with reading, and it's a bonus when the author is local and we can call him one of our own. Thank you so much. And now, if you guys want to ask any questions, we're going to open up the floor to Q&A. So you're welcome to ask your question.
This is a good moment before the first question. Steve, stand up. My latest book is about the Civil War, Black families during the Civil War. And my friend Steve will welcome you when you make your first, I hope it's not your first trip to Camp Nelson, just south of Nicholasville. Go to Camp Nelson, take your children and families with you, and look
So
and
much
ask
fun.
for Steve.
So much fun.
Hey, Jade.
Any questions?
There are two there. Granddaughter in the back of the room. Everybody look at my granddaughter. She's making embarrass her, right? A current freshman at the University of Kentucky.
Is there a comic book character that you would write about?
Oh, so many. You must know about my fascination for comics. We have in storage, we have a really sizable collection of action figures that are all connected to comics. We've been collecting comics since I was 11 years old. I don't know if there's just one that I would write about. My son bought me a collection, an anthology of African comics that I had never seen before. So I'm still being introduced to new characters every day. I think that if I could write about a comic character, it might be somebody I already know, so it would feel kind of cliche. I'm gonna take the default Black Panther's son, who's introduced in the last movie, so he doesn't have a storyline yet. So that gives me lots of room to turn him into an astronaut. Thank you for that question.
Have you reconciled with your sisters, and have they over the years provided a lot of fodder or thought or for your poetry?
Wow, thank you for that question. My oldest sister had every one of my books in her living room, and they were in pristine condition. When I say pristine condition, I mean they had never been opened. And if you tried to open them, she might smack you in the back of the hand, and she would say, just look at it, as if that's what it was for, that's the whole thing. It's just a book. You don't open
Like
it and read it.
an artifact or something?
It was an artifact. But it was also part of her archives. So out of respect for her, it was always hard to not try to crease a page, because that's my my natural desire to just kind of make those books look lived in, but not to her. She thought it was best preserved. But my sisters also know that their unofficial job is to correct my memory of things. My sister and I have never reconciled the actual color of the bicycle that she owned that I was riding when it broke.
It just broke on its own. You didn't have anything to do with it.
There are different versions of the story, depending on who's telling it, including how or why it broke, My version is very different from hers, but she still tries to make me feel guilty for bringing the bike back broken. That wasn't how it was when I left with it. So I guess it's my fault, but I don't know. But yeah, I don't know that I have not forgiven them for writing in crayon all the way through the encyclopedia set. I think that needs more forgiveness than a broken bike. I mean, there's a whole set of encyclopedias, irreplaceable.
So forgive me if you've already said this, but where are you in the birth order?
I'm the second out of the oven. I am now the oldest living. And it was so funny because when I passed my oldest sister in school, 3rd to 4th grade, and she loved all the nieces and nephews thinking that I was the oldest. And she never corrected them, I might suggest that was the actual case. And she was like, well, wait a minute, you graduated when? And then I would just shut up and think, I can't win this debate. But yeah, second out of the oven, but oldest by default. There's one in the back corner. I see you, Stevie Steve.
Hi there. I was thinking a lot about the importance of unspoken voices in relation to your love of various media, whether it be landscapes of the real world or comics or historical films or poetry. And I was wondering if there was a type of media you feel is underrepresented.
That I've produced or that exists? I'm sorry.
In general.
In general, underrepresented. Well, I guess it depends, who and where you live. I think there are a lot of people in Kentucky who don't have Wi-Fi. So there's media that they don't even have access to. And one of my nephews only reads his comics online now. He just downloads them. It just feels wrong. And I'm like, you can still buy it in a comic book store. Why would you put a comic book store out of business? But I think that this new generation is doing their thing. I have a grandson who's a tattoo artist. I think that's a new media because tattoos used to be like a single thing, and now you order a whole sleeve or a half sleeve. And he keeps threatening to finish my arm because he's so I can fix that arm, I put a whole sleeve on there. Granddad, I'm like, oh, that's a lot of pain, but it might happen. But I think that's a hard one to answer. I think because media changes, technology changes so quickly. Been on my watch, it's preloaded with like a dozen different photos that cycle through. And sometimes I look down, like right now, that's my wife and son, and and then the image after that is an image of a bumblebee, which is my sister who's now deceased. About a dozen family members, in honor of her, we got bumblebee tattoos. So it's like I go from this sweet place to a different kind of sweet place, with just an image. And so, but I never expected to be able to do that on my watch, So I always wonder what's next, that we'll be able to, tee off from the highway, Gavin, with the next technology. I don't know, I think I'm hoping that whatever happens media-wise or technology-wise, that we still have books, there's something about the article, the artifact, the physical thing that you hold and read from and share and pass that has a kind of power that I don't think technology can reproduce. And there's something about being read to, and reading and discovering language for the first time that has a kind of power that I think ChatGPT can't recreate that, I listen to my wife read to and with, our son at night, and the joy in his voice. He's learning things about storytelling and language that a computer can't teach. And I think he's also fallen in love with storytelling and words and literature at the same time because of how he's learning it. And I think a lot of parenting is happening by sticking a screen in front of a kid and thinking that, they're mesmerized, so it must be a good thing happening. But I don't know that that's true. And it doesn't replace the magic that happens when, parents and adults are that involved in the passing on this literacy thing, the empowerment that happens because of literacy. I think I write a lot about that. In all my books, it kind of shows up in some way. But I don't know. My granddaughter probably could answer that better than me. What's the new media, Jade? That social media. There you go. That's her artist right there, and scholar. Thank you. Hey, Tim, you had a question? Speaking of Governor School for the Arts.
When you write your poetry about York or Medgar Evers or the other historical figures that you've considered, you obviously have a responsibility to tell their story rightly and to do them justice. To what extent do you allow yourself in your own voice to affect the voice of the subject?
It sounds like a theater question. I try very hard to stay out of the way, especially when I'm giving voice to a character. My goal is for it to sound so authentic that people ask me, where did you find those words that person wrote? I mean, that's what I want them to say. I want them to believe that it's not me speaking. But at the same time, if I render them as poems, then I have to give them titles. And those titles will also tell on me. I think if you just read poem titles in my books, you can be able to figure out what kind of music I love, what my politics are, how I feel about family, where I've traveled in the world, what languages I'm most familiar with. It all shows up. What I've been reading, what I've ever read, what books stuck with me, they show up because it's locked in my head. And it's all I have to use to try to color or label the thing that has somebody else's voice, but has my title. But I do try to stay out of the way when I'm writing historical poetry. I think that's the goal. And I use every means possible when I'm writing in the voice of women. I try to channel my own sisters and the women who raised me to make it sound authentic. And so that, people believe it's them, that they actually said this thing because it sounds real. It sounds like what they would have said. And I think playwrights must do the same thing, Isaac Murphy, the book, most people don't know that it was written as a play first. I was asked to write a play about Isaac Murphy, and I hadn't written a play in so long that I decided to write character studies that turned into poems. And then when I was ready to write the book or the play, I had these leftover stacks of character studies that actually were poems. And the book of poetry came out the same week that the play opened. So it was a nice kind of double dipping that happened. Yeah. Good to see you. Thank you.
Okay. So you mentioned a children's book that you're writing and a trail between Knoxville and I'm just curious if that trail has a name.
Well, they're going to rename it, but it's if you go to downtown Gatlinburg and head out of town towards, no, not that far. It's not. It's the closest ranger station on the local tour, and I can't think of it right now because it's been a year since I was there last, but it's a 7-minute drive from that main strip in Gatlinburg. So you may have been there, but it's the only accessible trail in the area. And it's flat. It's wide enough for wheelchairs. The current placards have Braille on the signage. It's right at the edge of one of the forks of the Pigeon River. It's a beautiful space. I think the entire loop is less than a mile. But it's kind of a hidden gem. And so when this, we're about a year away from getting the placards up and ready. But it's been exciting just going doing the research and kind of walking around and watching other people interact with the space and seeing how they respond to, it's so much nature. You forget that there's a city or all that nightlife and day life in Gatlinburg 5 minutes away. Or, a bear about to walk across the street. There's always that, but and I thought I was done with children's books after the first one. But because of the A is for Affrilachian, they read it and loved it, and then invited me to come down and try to do something that was non-traditional. So we've all been down. Kumasi went down and walked the trail with me, and Shauna went down, and we've made several trips just spinning the space. That's one of the things that I think young poets don't appreciate as much, is what happens if you can do some in-person research or even go into the archives and pull up old information that you didn't know about, that resource material can really drive and enhance almost every kind of poetry that you can write. It just makes it sing, I think.
Is it the Sugarlands Valley?
It is the Sugarlands Valley. There you go.
Leave it to the Camp Nelson representative over here to find.
Leave it to a park ranger to know everything about parks. Yeah, thanks, Steve.
All right. Any other questions? Yes.
So I saw Frank present at the University of Kentucky on Monday, and I wanted to surprise him tonight, and I hope that worked, Frank.
I'm surprised.
Okay, yeah. So, when we read a lot of historic documents, especially of enslaved people, you'll see a lot of enslaved people mark X, right? And it says his or her mark. And every time I see X now, I think of Frank X. Walker. And, Frank's ancestors freed themselves by joining the Union Army at places like Camp Nelson during the Civil War. And you were sharing the story about one of your ancestors, and the wife of the soldier will file a pension claim. She marks X. Both the witnesses are her sons. And you were talking about from enslavement and illiteracy to literally the next generation out of slavery becoming writers and educated. And now, a century later, someone in the family is a poet laureate and a professor and a renowned writer. Can you share more on that and what that means to you and your family?
I think he did the whole thing. But and thank you. What I was sharing with the other audience is that while doing the research, going through archival material, and reading affidavits written by Mary Edlin, the widow of Randall Edlin, who was a third great-great-grandfather who fought in the Civil War for the Union Army, stationed at Camp Nelson. Reading those documents, knowing that it was 10 years worth of her having to get affidavits to prove that she was married to Randall, to prove that they had children, to prove that he was dead. And there are all these documents that talk about how he died, how he was injured. And this was all new information to me, and it was all written on these very formal, long-form, longhand affidavits. And I looked at them maybe a dozen times before I zoomed in and recognized that her signature looked different every time. And after zooming in, I saw that between her first and last name, between Mary and Edlin, there was a X, and above the X, there was a her. Sometimes I said his, but her mark. And then the light bulb went on, and I realized that, okay, she could not write. This was her signature. And the X was her signature, her mark. And somebody else was putting her name down. And then with further investigation, I realized that every time that happened, had to be two witnesses who were literate, who had to validate that she was who she said she was. And as I comb through the documents, towards the end of that 10-year cycle, the witnesses for Mary Edelin become William and Scott Edelin. And I go back to the family tree, and those are her sons. And I can look at the signatures even closer and find out that William's penmanship is superior to Scott's. And I'm thinking, well, he was a bad student or lazy, but I go back to the family tree and I see that he's 10 years older. So it all starts making sense. And you see these stories come closer and closer. But the thing that got me the most was having to recognize that I thought I was the first X in the family, but 100 years before me, somebody's already using the X and reaching out to me across time. And once I made that kind of connection, it was, my allergies kicked in, and I had a moment. But it was a powerful moment, just recognizing all of that and what it meant, and the power of literacy. That, like Steve said, one generation out of slavery, the family is committed to literacy, and the power that comes with being literate, and how that love for words and interest in words and the need to pass it on, and recognizing what it could do for you and how important it is to make it to college and to write entrance exams and to pass those classes in a space that your own mother passed through before you were even born. That legacy just keeps being passed on, and it's sometimes it's just breathtaking, recognizing that this thing started and it's still going. I'm a very proud great grandfather now. I have 2 great grandchildren, and people think, "Oh, you're a grandfather?" I think, no, I said great grandfather. I don't mean I'm that kind of grandfather. I mean that I'm a great grandfather. They said, "How's that possible?" I said, "We all started young. We all started young, and we're passing it. Even the creativity. I think we have. Her mother went to Governor's School for the Arts as a writer, but she now works from home for Apple computers. Her brother, who we thought would be the writer, is an industrial designer who got a degree from UK in engineering and went back to school and got another degree in industrial design. So all this creativity. Her sons are tattoo artists and college students. And we're looking at this next crew, wondering what they're going to be. At this rate, we will get that astronaut. Kumasi, no pressure.
Anybody else with a question? All right.
You good?
Yeah. Well,
You got
Reckoning
more
with the
questions?
Past is a book that was written about your own work. What was that experience like?
It was surreal. On your seats, there's a handout for this book that just came out a couple of weeks ago called Reckoning with the Past, the historical poetry of Frank X. Walker. I've had doctoral dissertations and papers in general written about my work over the years, but 35 years in, this feels satisfying and rewarding to know that the work has been meaningful enough for somebody to study it.
The author is Christine
Yohe. She's at NKU. She'll be at Joseph Best in March, I think March the 15th, pushing this book. And it's, she was given access to the new book that comes out next year, so you could read her, critical analysis of all the historical poetry. There's 6 of them. And she talks about the ways that Isaac Murphy, Medgar Evers, and York's lives intersect, and how family and identity and place become important and are made real in these spaces through the poems. And it was strange when it first happened. You know, I went to the opening and I'm thinking, I hadn't read it yet. This is going to be, I hope it's good. Hope what she said was fair. But it's brilliant work. And the, very learned, she's a UNC grad, so she knows her stuff. Not that UK fans can be proud of UNC people, but in this case, it's a good thing. But I love the book. I got to read it early, and I endorse it. I think it'll be a great teaching tool, especially if you can read the book alongside the actual collections of poetry. It's a good study. And if you've read any of those collections, either the York books or the Isaac Murphy book or the Medgar Evers book, I think you can just turn to the chapter about that particular book and read in that order, because it's in here. And it's really well done. I don't get anything out of the book, so I can promote it.
It's amazing to me that you're opening yourself and your creations, your work, to criticism and praise, and allowing people to kind of dissect your work and giving it your endorsement. That says a lot about you as a writer and as a human being, and I think that's lovely.
Yeah. Well, that's the easy part, because they were going to criticize it anyway. Best thing about critics, they don't need the invitation,
I love it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for this great conversation.
Lovely evening, and thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in to Turning the Page. If you enjoyed listening, there will be more to come, so please give us a follow so that you don't miss the next episode.
We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.